It was supposed to be a peaceful Sunday morning at St. Mark's Church in New Hampshire, a day of celebration, family, and new beginnings. The small wooden chapel buzzed softly with whispers and the occasional cry of an infant, as friends and relatives gathered for the baptism of baby Noah Jameson. Everything was going as planned until Karoline Leavitt stood up. No one expected her to speak, much less confront Father Bennett in the middle of the ceremony. But within moments, the mood shifted from reverent to stunned silence. What Karoline did next would leave everyone in that church questioning everything, and talking about it for weeks to come. Karoline wasn't on the guest list. She hadn't spoken to the Jameson family in nearly 2 years, not since a quiet falling out that most assumed would never be resolved. But there she was, hair pinned back, coat still damp from the drizzle outside, walking slowly down the aisle as Father Bennett began reciting the baptismal blessing. At first, people thought she might be coming forward to join in prayer or offer a reading. But Karoline didn't stop at the front pews. She stepped directly onto the small platform where the priest stood, water still cupped in his palm. Her voice, clear and steady, broke the silence. "Before you bless this child," she said, "there's something this church needs to hear." Father Bennett froze. His hand, mid-air, hovered awkwardly above the infant's forehead. Karoline's eyes locked on his, and for a split second, a flicker of something passed between them. Guilt? Recognition? Fear? Gasps echoed through the chapel as she pulled a folded letter from her coat pocket. Some people looked away. Others stared, wide-eyed, unable to believe what was unfolding. She read only a few lines, names, dates, quiet accusations, but that was enough. The silence afterward felt heavier than the words themselves. The kind of silence where nobody knows if they should speak or pray. Father Bennett didn't say a word. He stepped back from the baptismal font, placed the silver shell on the altar, and turned away. Karoline stood alone at the front of the church, still holding the letter. No one came to stop her. No one asked her to leave. Outside, the rain had stopped, but inside St. Mark's, the storm had only just begun. People began shifting in their seats. A baby started crying in the back. One of the godparents leaned over to whisper something to the mother, who sat frozen, clutching baby Noah a little tighter. Karoline folded the letter slowly, almost ceremoniously, then turned to the congregation. "I didn't come here to ruin this child's day," she said. Her voice trembled slightly now, but it carried. "I came here because I couldn't keep quiet anymore. Some truths aren't meant to stay hidden behind stained glass and silence." From the crowd, an older woman stood up, Mrs. Clara Morin, a lifelong member of the parish. "Karoline," she said gently, "maybe this isn't the right time." Karoline turned toward her. "Then when? After the next baptism? After another innocent family puts their trust in someone who—" Her voice broke. She couldn't say the rest. She didn't have to. Father Bennett had quietly exited through the side door of the altar, his robes brushing against the stone as he passed. Not a single word. Not a single defense. A low murmur began to rise in the church. Questions. Whispers. People checking their phones, maybe already texting someone about what had just happened. It was the kind of moment that wouldn't stay in a church. It would spill out, find its way into homes, phones, headlines. Karoline looked down at the font, still filled with holy water. She stared at her own reflection for a moment. Then she turned and walked down the aisle, Not running, not hiding, just walking. Calm, heavy, certain. Outside, the gray clouds had parted slightly. The sidewalk glistened with leftover rain. A few people followed her out, not to confront, not to comfort, but simply to be near her, as if whatever had just happened inside had shaken something loose in themselves, too. No one knew yet what the letter truly contained. No one knew if Father Bennett would return. And no one knew what Karoline would do next. But everyone knew this. The story wasn't over. Not even close. That night, the story began to spread beyond the church walls. A blurry photo of Karoline standing in front of the altar showed up on Facebook. Someone had discreetly snapped it mid-confrontation. The caption read, "Something happened today at St. Mark's. Not sure what, but it felt big." Comments poured in. Questions. Rumors. A few tried to defend the priest, but most just wanted to know what was in the letter. Karoline didn't go home right away. She drove around town for nearly an hour, her phone buzzing nonstop in the passenger seat. Messages from old classmates, co-workers, even strangers. A few were supportive. Most just asked one thing, "Is it true?" But she didn't respond. Not yet. Not until she knew what to do next. The next morning, the diocese issued a brief statement. Father Matthew Bennett has voluntarily stepped away from his parish duties, while the church reviews recent allegations brought to public attention. We ask for prayers for all involved. No denial, no clarification, just enough to confirm something had happened, and that someone somewhere was paying attention. Karoline sat alone in her kitchen, nursing a cold cup of coffee. On the table in front of her was the original letter, not the one she read in church, but the first one she'd received, the one that had started everything. It had arrived in the mail 8 months ago. No return address, just her name. Inside, a few typed paragraphs and signed. It spoke of incidents, patterns, names she hadn't heard in years. It mentioned Father Bennett directly, and it said he counted on people staying silent. She hadn't believed it at first. She'd even thrown it out. But something about it wouldn't leave her, so she started asking questions. Carefully, quietly, one conversation at a time. She found patterns. People who had once smiled too politely when his name was mentioned. People who had moved away without saying why. And one woman, a nurse now living 2 states over, who finally said, "I thought I was the only one." That's when Karoline stopped sleeping well. That's when she realized she had to do something. Now the doorbell rang. Karoline froze. She wasn't expecting anyone. She peered through the window. It was the mother of the baby, the woman whose child had been at the center of yesterday's baptism. She looked pale, shaken, holding something in her hand. Karoline opened the door slowly. I think I got one too," the woman said, handing over a small, sealed envelope. Karoline took the envelope with both hands. It was nearly identical to the one she had received months earlier. Plain white, no return address, her name typed in small block letters. The only difference was this one had been postmarked just 3 days ago. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she looked at the young mother, Emily Jameson, whose son had nearly been baptized the day before. "Did you read it?" Karoline asked quietly. Emily nodded, slowly. "Last night, after everything, I couldn't sleep. I opened the diaper bag and it was just there, like someone wanted me to find it. Karoline felt a chill crawl up her spine. Was it addressed to you? No, just said, for the family. But when I saw your name at the bottom, I knew I had to come. Karoline carefully slid her finger along the flap and unfolded the contents. It wasn't a copy of the old letter. This was new, shorter, sharper, contained only a list of dates. No explanations, no accusations, just dates, stretching back almost 2 decades, and one handwritten line at the bottom. How many baptisms has he done since 2007? The two women sat in silence at the kitchen table, the envelope between them like a silent witness. Emily rubbed her temples. I'm scared, she whispered, not just for Noah, but for what this means, for what we've let happen. Karoline looked down at the letter again. The dates weren't random. She recognized 2 of them. One was the year her friend Molly had abruptly dropped out of the youth choir. Another matched the funeral of a boy whose family had left the parish shortly after. She stood up suddenly and walked over to the drawer where she kept a folder, thick now with clippings, emails, and notes. She added this new letter on top. I think, she said, whoever is sending these, they want us to connect the dots. Emily stared at her. You think they were victims? Karoline hesitated. Maybe, or maybe they knew something. Maybe they saw something. Outside, the sky had turned a dull steel gray again. Not quite stormy, but heavy with something waiting to fall. Karoline looked out the window. Across the street, a black car had been parked for over an hour, unmoving, windows tinted. She'd seen it before. Not often. Just enough. Karoline sat back down, the wheels in her mind turning. This wasn't just about Father Bennett anymore. It was about the people who protected him, the ones who had looked the other way, and the ones who, like her, had chosen silence for too long. I think, Karoline said softly, this is only the beginning. 3 weeks later, an article appeared on the front page of the Concord Ledger, a newspaper known more for bake sale announcements than controversy. Allegations mount against local priest. Community demands answers. No names were printed. Not Karoline's, not Emily's. Just quotes from anonymous sources and former members of the congregation. But everyone in town knew. Everyone who had once sat in the pews of St. Mark's understood exactly who had lit the fuse. Under pressure, the diocese finally released a formal statement. Father Bennett would not return. An independent review had begun. A hotline was set up for anyone wishing to come forward. And St. Mark's, the quaint wooden church that had stood quietly for decades, closed its doors for pastoral restructuring. One Saturday morning, Karoline drove out toward the edge of town, to a quiet hilltop where an old stone bench overlooked the lake. It was a place she hadn't visited in years, not since high school, when she and Molly used to sit there and talk about life and the future. She pulled out her phone and opened a draft email. Typed, deleted, typed again. Finally, she wrote, "It's done. Not over, but done enough. Thank you for the letters. Whoever you are." She didn't send it, just saved it. Then she put her phone down and closed her eyes, letting the wind move through her hair. It felt like something, the weight, the anger, the ache was finally beginning to lift. Emily moved away a few weeks later. No dramatic goodbyes, just a quiet explanation. She wanted to raise Noah somewhere without shadows. Karoline understood. They hugged once on the porch.
No tears.
No promises. Just the look of two people who had been through a storm together. And life somehow started to move on. Not the same, but forward. St. Mark's remained boarded up. No buyers. No plans. Some of those who had once bowed their heads in silence began to speak. Karoline, though the letters had stopped, kept them all in a locked wooden box beneath her bed, not to relive them, but so she'd never forget. Some secrets are never spoken aloud. They move through lives in silence. But once the silence is broken, nothing is ever the same again.